So good afternoon, people, and welcome to the RAN webinar on local evaluation and interventions on local level for prevent coordinators. There are now 19 attendees in the room. There should be around 40 or 50. Let's see if the rest is still coming in. Welcome once again. My name is Rick Schelen, and together with Feline Denise and Lieke Wouterse, I'm from the RAN staff, and we'll be hosting this meeting. And we've got two excellent speakers. But let us just first introduce RAN a little bit. Maybe you all know and heard of RAN, but some of you maybe have not. RAN is a European radicalization awareness network. It's aimed at the first-time practitioners, the people who work in their day-to-day jobs on countering and preventing radicalization and polarization. And there's currently over 6,000 people within the network doing all kinds of meetings all over Europe normally, but now since the lockdowns and since COVID, it's all been digitally. So also we're experimenting with the webinars, and this is one of those. So welcome. As I said, we've got two excellent speakers. First one will be Ron van Wonderen. He's from the Verwijn Jonker Institute in Utrecht. He's a senior advisor over there, and he's an expert in evaluation research and topics like discrimination, polarization, radicalization. So he would be the perfect first speaker for us to tell us all about evaluation and different strategies and different kind of techniques. And then we will have a Q&A session with Ron on what he's told us. And second speaker is Eric Poignot. He's from the city of Strasbourg. He's a highly experienced local coordinator in the field of Pcbe, that is the prevention and countering of violent extremism. And he will share his experiences and thoughts and lessons learned on evaluation and developing your local strategy through evaluation and reviewing. So there will be one speaker from more of the overview of things and one speaker from really the ground level experience as a local coordinator. And we're looking really forward to have a good discussion and using also the interaction with the audience to have a good Q&A sessions with both speakers. And we will start, of course, with Ron van Wonderen. As I said, he's a senior advisor at the Verwijn Jonker Institute, an expert on evaluation and doing research in topics as radicalization, polarization, and discrimination. And the audience is really awaiting your presentation, Ron. So I say, you go ahead and tell us all about what you know and what you've developed in the field of evaluation. And for the attendees, we will have a Q&A later. You can ask your questions in the Q&A section of the chat. And we will just have the interaction at the end. So Ron will first share his story with us. Thank you.
Rick, for your kind introduction. I will try to share my PowerPoint. Okay. So I hope everybody can see the first slide of the PowerPoint. If not, please, Rick, tell me that.
No, it's highly visible. It's okay. Super.
It's okay. Okay, thank you. So I will present. In my presentation, I will tell you some things about evaluation because it's a very broad topic. Basically, I will tell you the following things. Why is evaluation? Why should you do it in the first place? What kinds of evaluation there are? There are basically three main types of evaluation. These are planned evaluation in the first phase of your intervention, the process evaluation, and of course, the impact or effect evaluation. I present some tools for evaluation. This will be both qualitative and quantitative methods. I will tell you something about what determines which evaluation methods you can choose. And I will finish my presentation with some conditions for successful evaluation. If you want to find on the internet some more information on what I tell you, then first I will refer you to this website, socialestabiliteit.nl. It's a Dutch website. I was involved in designing this website. It's on behalf of the Dutch government we made this, and it is the purpose is for local municipalities to evaluate their radicalization policy, the interventions on radicalization. They use this toolkit. It is in Dutch, but if you use Google Translate, you can understand a lot of it. And the other website that I want to mention, which is a main source of my presentation, is this one, Impact Europe. I also have been involved in designing this toolkit, and it gives a lot of information about evaluation designs, evaluation methods, learned lessons. So this might be interesting for you to have a look at. So why should you evaluate your Pcpe program or your interventions? First of all, of course, is accountability. You want to know if your intervention is working. You have to explain to the ones who give you the money for the intervention that it is working or not working. And you may account for example, the municipality council who wants to know, okay, you conduct interventions, does it work? However, this is not the only purpose. A much better frame, I think, is learning how to improve your intervention. Because if you evaluate, then accountability is only one thing, but the other thing, and maybe more important, is, well, what can I learn from my evaluation? How can I improve my intervention? In the real world, there is a lot of reluctancy to evaluate, and one of the reasons is this accountability, because it makes you vulnerable. If it turns out from your evaluation that it is not working or not working properly, then yeah, you have to tell that it makes you vulnerable. Better is to use the other frame, that you evaluate for learning how to improve. And this means, yeah, what I say, evaluation is learning, not blaming. And the other thing I suggest is that please don't conduct evaluations too early in the process of your intervention, because of pressure to report quickly results. People start to evaluate too early, but in a lot of cases, interventions are not developed sufficiently to find good results. In many cases, your intervention can be improved during the course. So you should use evaluation to improve your intervention, and later on, after 2-3 years, for example, you can really start impact evaluation for your accountability. So mainly 3 main types of evaluation. If you want to know what are the effects of your intervention, then you are looking for the effect, the impact evaluation. If you want to know how your intervention is implemented, what can improve in your implementation, then you are looking for process evaluation. And one very important phase of evaluation, really important, is the plan evaluation, which you conduct before actually your intervention has started. If you want to select an intervention, for example, what is a real answer to your problem, then you have to find out, okay, what is my problem? How can I operationalize my problem? Which interventions tackle this problem? It will help you to find a proper intervention. And it also will help you to make a good evaluation plan. Because if you know the details of your intervention, then you know which indicators you should use to evaluate intervention. So what is a plan evaluation? Good preparation is really half the battle. If you do a plan evaluation, you have some points that you always have to check. What is the social issue, the problem that the intervention is an answer to? It's not always easy to do. It's not you should think about, well, what's exactly the problem, because the match between the problem and the intervention it should match. Too many times I see that the match is not good. What do you want to achieve with intervention in what way? Then you are talking about theory of change. I will come back to that later. What's the theoretical basis for the intervention? You have to find out. If you select an intervention, you have to understand what's the theoretical basis for this intervention. Why should it work to tackle the problem? Are the intervention objectives clear and described concretely? If not, you should do it yourself. And also, you have to think about which persons or organizations should be involved in conducting the intervention and in conducting the evaluation, because an intervention you do not alone. You have partners, you have people who cooperate with you in conducting the intervention. You have your target groups, so work together with them. A theory of change, which is very important. It means if I do this, for example, a certain method that you use in your intervention, then this will happen, an intended effect. In the plan evaluation, you try to find out how the intervention may bring the desired change. Interventions are always made up of various elements. Which elements are these? Is there any scientific evidence that these elements may work to be effective? Elements, you can say they are the building blocks of your interventions. I think it may be good to give practical example of what I mean with elements of an intervention. I have evaluated 2 years ago an intervention which is called parental resilience. This is that parents are trained to make their children more resilient to risk factors for radicalization. The parents, they learn, let me explain something about this intervention. The parents learn to be aware of their influence as a parent on the development of the children. Parents are not always well aware of what polarization and radicalization are, where they come from, and where dangers are associated with radicalization. Parents also do not always know how to discuss this with the children, how to make the children more resistant to radicalization. Well, this intervention consists of certain elements which are proved by theoretical research to be effective. So if you know that these elements are part of your intervention, then you already know that it may be effective. A few examples of these elements is, for example, that parents are explained what is radicalization, how does the radicalization process proceed, how do you recognize polarization, radicalization, but also an element is how do you get to stay in touch with your child? How do you communicate with your child? Who do you have an open communication with your children about these topics? Also, where can you go to if you need help? You have to make the support structure. The support structure, you should make it transparent. What are the organizations that parents can go to? What help can they get? And a very important element is trust. The trainer of this intervention should create an atmosphere for parents to share their thoughts and to talk freely. Okay, these are examples of elements. If you know this and you know that it is theoretical based, then it's a first level of evidence for that your intervention may work. Then if you have no money or time to conduct research, then this is a first level of evidence, even without doing any research. Another advantage of knowing the theoretical basis of your intervention is that it helps you in selecting an intervention. You try to find an intervention which, if you want to make parents more resilient, then you have to find an intervention which has these elements. So this helps you. Of course, in a plan evaluation, you want to set up evaluation. That means that the objectives of your interventions should be clear and described concretely. You should not only formulate main goals, but also measurable sub-goals. Make it smart, your intervention. How do you want to collect the data? What is needed for you to collect data? Think in advance about this. You have to organize in advance your data collection. You should know which information should be recorded. You should guarantee the cooperation of all the other actors involved in the evaluation. It's very important to involve partners in an early stage before the intervention actually starts. Why? Because especially in the Pcbe domain, trust is very important. Evaluation requires trust and cooperation from implementers and other parties. If you do not so, then you may encounter resistance by partners, which hinders you in your intervention, but also in evaluation your intervention. This means that in your plan evaluation, you should involve your associates in setting up and devising the evaluation. And please make agreements about this. You should have agreement on the goals of the evaluation, the indicators which should be measured, and how the data is collected. Our next main type of evaluation is process. Process evaluation is about how is your intervention carried out? Is it carried out properly as intended? If you know how your intervention is carried out, this will give you some information about if it should be reshaped. Because an intervention can always be improved in most of the times. That's the main reason why you should conduct process evaluation. Of course, you can do a lot of research, but even a simple process evaluation is a form of process evaluation. You can count how many activities, how many participants. You can organize focus groups with all people involved with the intervention. But if you want to have some more evidential value, then you should use a combination of data collection methods. For example, observations, that you do observations yourself on how it is, how the intervention is conducted. For example, you do participating observation with a work group or a lecture or whatever. You can conduct interviews, can conduct focus groups with professionals, or you can conduct surveys. The third main type of evaluation is effect. In the effect evaluation, you want insights into the outcome, the effects of the intervention. You want to know which outcomes matches the objectives of your intervention.
Ron, can I ask you maybe to speed up a little bit? Because you officially you only have 3 minutes left, but take some more time, but not too much.
Okay, thank you. I will. You can evaluate which are undesirable effects of your interventions. And of course, also with effect evaluation, you can find points for improvement. But also here, don't start too early with effect evaluation. Give your intervention some chance and make improvements before you will conduct evaluation for accountability. Well, there are some factors that may influence the evidential value of your effect evaluation: the quantity and quality of your collected data, the presence of a pre and post measurement, and the presence of a control group. If least evidential value, which happens a lot of time in Pcpe interventions because you have no other data, you conduct interviews, you have no pre-measurement, but only interim of post-measurement, you have no control groups. But if you're lucky, you can deploy a different methods of measurement. You have pre-measurement, post-measurement, you have target group and control groups participated in the evaluation. There are lots of methods that you can use for effect research. If you want to know, you can find it in the evaluation toolkit, which I gave you the link to. I only name a few. If you select what kind of method you use, you know there are constraints, costs. Evaluation costs time, costs money. It depends on your goals, but for your goals, it's not always needed to conduct complex evaluation. You call maybe improvement of your intervention, for example, then you can use simple evaluation. Skills available versus skills required to conduct the evaluation. Please think, what skills do you need and who has these skills? And what is the capacity in my organization? Maybe you have to outsource your evaluation. Well, a few words about some methods. Desk-based research. I already said that if you know what elements your intervention is built of, and you know if there's scientific research, then you have a first base level measurement of effect. You can conduct interviews with respondents. The advantage is you can ask deeper questions about answer if you compare it with a survey, for example. Disadvantage is it costs a lot. It costs more time than survey research. You can focus groups, which is often used in evaluation. This is you have a group discussion with some respondents. It has a lot of advantages. People react on each other. This may bring up more motives and arguments than one-to-one conversation. It costs less time than one-to-one conversation, but disadvantage, group members may be reluctant to share their experiences if they feel unsafe in the group. Participating observation is a really nice form of evaluation because you see firsthand what is happening in the intervention. Survey, of course, you can set out structured questionnaires. This is not difficult to do anymore because you can do it online, which makes it a lot cheaper and quicker to conduct surveys than in the past. Experimental research, that is what financiers of interventions want a lot of times, but it is almost impossible because you need a control group, you need a long of time, you need enter and post measurement. It's expensive and time consuming, and in a lot of times it's not necessary to do this. Do it yourself or outsourcing. Evaluation, you can do it yourself. You can use the Toolkit, for example, which I referred to. Process evaluation, you can do it yourself, or if you don't have time or skills, you can outsource. But effect or impact evaluation, it's better to outsource to a university or specialized research agency. So this is my last slide. To summarize, evaluation is learning, not blaming. Evaluation makes it possible to learn to further improve your CVE intervention. You should involve partners in an early stage. You should make a detailed plan evaluation and don't conduct an effect evaluation too soon.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ron, for your story about all the types of evaluation there are. I'd like to encourage all the attendees to ask their questions in the Q&A. Of course, I've got some questions myself. You emphasized the need to have trust with the partners who you are working with if you want to have a proper evaluation. Mm-hmm. So trust is a really big issue in the world of PCVE cooperation. But what if you were trying to evaluate that cooperation and the trust itself? Is that also possible, or should you build trust in another way? So I'm interested in that thing you said.
The most important thing here is the early stage, that you should involve your partners and discuss with them about, well, why should we evaluate? How should we do it? Which indicators should we use? And this is building trust, because you need your partners in the data collection also. If you want to make observations, for example, then they should let you in. If you want to conduct interviews, they should facilitate that you could interview respondents or professionals who conduct the intervention. If you want to do a survey, they should facilitate also. So the building of trust is really in the first stage of your intervention and evaluation.
And I guess also if you're focused on learning, that would be a better way to build the trust than if you're focusing on the accountability part.
Sure.
It's all about money or something, or who's to blame if something goes wrong or something like that.
Yeah, certainly.
Okay. So you also said the effect evaluation, and you said maybe in PCVE it's kind of difficult. I can gather that lots of time it's really small numbers of people we are aiming at. to make contact with, or to try and well, get them away from the radical influences. So how does that work in the evaluation way? Do you have an example how to have a proper evaluation when the numbers are that low?
Yeah. For example, there are evaluations of how's it in English? Those networks who exchange information on radicalized persons, and they exchange the
kind of the information networks from municipalities to communities to get the early signals of possible radicalization, or to measure the temperature in society as a whole.
And this has been evaluated in the Netherlands, and the methods that you use then is qualitative. You attend, as a researcher, you attend these meetings and you observe what is exchanged. You will conduct interviews with all participants on their practice and what is going good, what is going wrong, and how to improve.
Okay. Yeah. In this sphere, it's not a big group, but you can just engage them in the talks and have a qualitative analysis and evaluation. Okay. So people, you're watching your 30 attendees now. If you have some questions, please put them in the chat or raise your hand, or put them in the Q&A session. We can then get them to Ron if you have some questions. But of course, I've got one more question. There's also kind of political tensions, of course, around this theme of radicalization. How does that interfere with your evaluation work? Because sometimes there will be some kind of political party who wants to prove his or her point, and have an evaluation done just to prove some point or something. So how to steer away from the political side and have the proper learning-based evaluation?
Yeah, it has two kinds of interference. One is that they want political parties want to evaluate too soon. That the intervention is not ripe yet to be evaluated, and that's a problem, because if you evaluate too soon, then they will stop interventions. But if you adapt the intervention because you learn of your evaluation, then the evaluation is improved and it could run further. So it's a pity if politics is involving too early. And the other reason is, or the other interference is at the start, that things must quickly. There's political pressure. The newspapers are writing on the problem and say, well, there must happen something now, because otherwise we'll be too late. And then the implementation of the intervention is very quick, which means that, there's no baseline measurement, there's no fault about the indicators which you should add to your intervention so it can be measured. Then you can conduct a post-measurement, of course, but preferably you want to have a pre-measurement also. And because of this interference, that it does not happen a lot of times that these pre-measurements exist.
Yes, okay, thank you. So I guess your story is really clear, so there are no questions from attendees. But we've got one from Lieke. So I would like to ask Lieke to put on her video and her microphone and ask the last question, I guess. And then we can maybe move on to Eric for his story. If someone has still got a question, please put it in the chat or the Q&A, or otherwise we will move on with the second presenter after this. Lieke, it's your question.
Thanks. Yes, thanks. Now, I was wondering, Ron, because you mentioned about the effects evaluation, you mentioned that it has most evidential value if you also have a control group for the intervention. But then I wondered because, in the area of Pcbe, it can be rather difficult to have a control group. Also, well, considering all ethical considerations, if you have a control group that is not having the intervention and the other is receiving, or well, so I was wondering if you could tell some more about that. How could you have a control group in Pcbe? Is that even possible?
Well, in most cases there is no control group in most evaluations. Only in some studies that has been conducted through universities who have the time, for example, for 3 years to conduct research, then sometimes you see control groups, because indeed the numbers of target groups are very limited, mostly in regularization. So, and the ethical reasons there are not to have a control group. So it's really difficult, and maybe this is not the most righteous design for evaluation. That those RCT designs, they are not very well fit to realization research.
Okay, thank you, Ron. And thank you, Lieke. I guess we'll wrap up your part of the webinar, Ron. Thank you very much for your presentation and your answers to my questions, at least. So we'll be moving on to Eric Pregnot, who I've already introduced as being the local coordinator in Strasbourg, France. You can all have a look at Eric now, because when he's going to have his presentation, he will turn off his camera for the internet connection to be best to take on his voice to us. So he's an experienced local coordinator, also experienced in the work of evaluating some parts of PCVE, and also in doing a review after things happened in Strasbourg. But he will explain that all himself much better than I can. So Eric, please share your story with us. And maybe that indeed turn off your camera and put on your mic and share your story with us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rick. Thank you, Lieke. Hello again, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you today, and I also recognize some familiar names from the RAN local working group. So good to be with you today. Like Rick said, the idea is to really give you a practical perspective on evaluation with the example of a city of Strasbourg. I'm certainly not an expert on evaluation. I'm totally a practitioner, and the idea really is to take evaluation from a very practical perspective. And I'll do that. I will focus on two questions. The first one is evaluation in day-to-day Pcb activities, how you can do that, how you can actually evaluate or use some evaluation tools in your Pcb activities. And like Rick said, also the lessons we learn, that's the second point, the lessons we learn from the terrorist attack that happened in December 2018. Next slide, please. But first, I'd like to give you an idea of the Pcb landscape in the city of Strasbourg. Oops. Please keep in mind that Pcb is a rather new and recent public policy in France, especially as compared to other EU countries. Actually, the first national action plan was adopted only in 2014. That's almost a whole decade after the UK Prevent strategy, for example. So a new public policy. Strasbourg is now considered one of the most active cities on the subject in the country. The department, which is the territory around the city, the Bas-Rhin department, Bas-Rhin stands for Lower Rhine, the Rhine River, the Bar department is deeply affected and has been deeply affected by violent extremism and terrorism. Just to give you one example, there was a first terrorist attempt against the Christmas market, not in 2018, but in the year 2000. That's 20 years ago, in 2000. So we knew that there was a terrorist threat in the department and in the city. In 2016, the city decided to be active in the field of Pcbe, and as a result, a local coordinator was appointed, that's me, and the municipality adopted a municipal action plan, that's 2016. This comprehensive action plan focuses on primary and secondary prevention with an intention to work on what you call the breeding ground of radicalization. And also you have to know that in France, security is very much under the authority of the state and not of the mayor. So our contribution is not directly on security, but rather on early primary and secondary prevention. This local strategy is described, if you're interested, in an ex-post paper that is available on the RAN website after the study visit we had in May 2019, and it gives you some information about the work we do at local level. Also, this strategy is currently under review by the new mayor, because we had the municipal elections right before summer, and it's a good time to start discussing evaluation. Next slide, please. No, actually, about evaluation in day-to-day Pcb activities. In 2017, so just 1 year after we adopted our first strategy, we had a small external review by a group of students, which pointed precisely to the lack of evaluation in our strategy and offered some simple recommendations. The recommendations were as follows. First, to set clear, smart objectives. So really to focus on the objectives of our strategy. Also to use different indicators, either quantitative but also qualitative indicators. And I'll give you some example later on. And also to assemble an internal evaluation team. So to have different people to collectively evaluate systems and interventions. Also, this review formulated two interesting remarks. First, to put things in perspective, you have to keep in mind that prevention, of course, is inherently difficult to evaluate. It's always difficult to prove that something didn't happen because of prevention work. We should keep that in mind. And also, proper evaluation needs resources. It actually costs money, and it takes time to conduct a proper evaluation. So not everybody can do that. Next slide, please. Of course, we know that as practitioners, most of the time, we don't like evaluation. It's really something we share, and we have to accept it. Why don't we like evaluation? First, because most of the time, it's difficult. It's based on techniques that most of the time, we don't really know about. So it's not easy to evaluate. Second, it's time and resource consuming. And most of the time, we practitioners are busy enough doing things. So evaluation means some some more workload. And also, it is true that in theory, evaluation helps you to improve, but it so happens that sometimes it's used as a way to criticize, and nobody likes to be criticized. So there is a gap sometimes between the theory and the practice of evaluation. So my recommendation at this point, if you want evaluation not to be a burden, if you want it to be useful, let's keep it simple. Let's try to understand what you can do on a day-to-day basis. It is true that large organizations usually have an internal audit and or evaluation department, but not all organizations do. Alternatively, a good recommendation if you want a rather ambitious evaluation is to look for partnerships, partnerships with the university, for example, because most of the time researchers need data, but they don't have a direct access to the field. They don't have access to the material. On the other hand, you can provide them with an access to the field, but you need evaluation. So why not work together? You provide researchers with an access to the field, and they will do the evaluation for you. So partnership with researchers with the university is really a win-win situation. Next slide, please. I'll give you an example of what we do concretely in terms of evaluation with the example of our training programs. Training activities is a good starting point to start evaluating because it's quite easy to evaluate training programs. In that respect, in Strasbourg, we do nothing fancy or nothing spectacular, but we evaluate our training sessions quite thoroughly. And we use different techniques. We use questionnaires. We have a tour de table at the end of every training session. We have reports by the trainer, and we have collective debriefing right after the training, and also, if possible, sometime later on. On the plus side, this evaluation is almost systematic. We evaluate almost everything we do in terms of training. Also, this debriefing allows for fine-tuning, and I'll give you an example of that later on. We use different and complementary techniques, and the more techniques you use, the better. And we have a double evaluation by myself and also by a colleague from human resources. The limits of that is that first, we use standardized questionnaires. So we don't have specific questionnaires for a specific training program. And sometimes that is a limit. We have evaluation by sessions, by programs, but we don't have a global evaluation of the whole training system. A question that is very difficult is to evaluate the long-term effect of training. What happens in the long term? And also, we evaluate satisfaction rather than impact. And trainees can be satisfied with a training session, even if there is no actual impact on professional practices. Evaluation is mostly internal. We have a few external evaluation, if only because external evaluation costs money. And all in all, we have a lack of resources. So we do the best we can with the few resources that we have. Just to show you, to give you one example of what we changed in our system after an evaluation, evaluations showed repeatedly that people were rather happy with our training sessions, but it remained quite theoretical. They wanted to work on case studies. There was a high demand for case studies. And that's why we decided to work in partnership with the CPRLV, which I guess most of you know, the CPRLV from Montreal. And we decided to incorporate the Hexagon training tool in our training programs with interesting results. This slide shows you what you can do if resources, time, and skills don't matter. If you have everything you need, you can have that kind of evaluation. It's not something we did ourselves. It's something that was done for us at some point by one of our partners. And it gives you an idea of how interesting evaluation of training can be if you have the resources to do that. This kind of spider web, for example, shows you the level of satisfaction in different aspects of the training. And you can see in that example that satisfaction was pretty high, except in two aspects of the training, which were practical implementation and also the presentation that was given to the PowerPoint presentation that was given to the trainees. So it shows you where you need to improve to make your training session better. Next slide, please. So it's just a continuation. If you have the right skills, the right resources, the right software, you can produce all sorts of statistics to help you improve your systems. Next slide. At this point, some pieces of advice on evaluation in day-to-day activities. First, if nothing else, reflect on your objectives. If you don't have the time, if you don't have the resources, just make your objectives clearer. That's a good point, and it's already a part of the work you have to do. Second, most of the time you already have data, you just don't know it yet. You don't have to look too far for data. Use questionnaires, observations, discussions with participants. You can use simple data, mix and match, use different techniques. Like I said, questionnaires, to the table, debriefing, and so on and so forth. And also it helps to have a more precise overview of the results. As I said, for more ambitious evaluation, look for partnerships. Be aware of your limits. There are things that you can't do, and in this situation, look for partnerships, for example, with the university. Next slide, please. Now, I'll say a few words about the unfortunate event that happened in December 2018 and what we learned. So in 2016, we had a retext, a feedback from the Paris attacks of November 2015. And it showed very clearly that the city of Strasbourg was at that point totally unprepared to react to a terrorist attack. The picture was quite clear. And based on this retext, we took 3 decisions. First, we organized trainings, first help trainings for citizens. Second, we decided to have a post-crisis and victim support system. And then we decided to organize a group of active citizens who could intervene and help after a crisis. I will give you a very broad perspective on how to improve your actions, your systems, and your interventions. And in that respect, I will talk about evaluation, but also more generally about monitoring, review, debriefing, retext, because I think that at the end of the day, it all serves the same purpose, which is to improve your systems. Next slide, please. Just a quick summary of what happened on December the 11th, 2018. On that fateful day, a terrorist named armed with a handgun and a hunting knife launched an attack on the Christmas market as the market was closing. Was a multiple offender and also a very severe social situation coming from a very violent and broken family. He was supposed to be arrested the very same morning. And on that day, he killed 5 and injured, sometimes severely, 11 more people. He was shot in the arm while trying to escape, and he did escape by taking a taxi hostage. And he was neutralized or killed only 48 hours later by a police patrol. Next slide, please. 1 month after the events, we had an official return of experience organized by a state agency, the prefecture, which represents the state at local level. And we learned from that very interesting coming from this official retext. First, we saw that every social actor played its part. There was no major individual failure, but, and that's a big but, there was a clear lack of coordination between structures. For example, in the life of was a kid, there was a clear lack of coordination between the school and social services. So not enough coordination in the work between structures, if you try to understand how we could have intervened better in the life of at a very early stage. Also, at some point, there was a clear lack of resources. At some point in time, for example, we needed a psychiatric evaluation of, and there was never a psychiatrist available when we needed this evaluation. So this evaluation could not happen. Also, in the case of, we had very little ideology because it was very little ideologically committed. There was very much violence. He grew up in a very violent environment. So it's not your typical, to say that, jihadist, in the sense that he was not very ideologically committed. But on the other hand, his father was ideologically committed, and he had a very toxic influence on Sheriff. Another point that emerged from the retext is that when prison, he was referred for radicalization, but there was no proper evaluation because at the time that happened in 2015, there was no proper evaluation system for radicalization, and so there was no proper intervention for radicalization. So detection, but no evaluation and no intervention. Another problem is how social actors in general understand and deal with religion, because most of the time, social actors have problems just understanding the meaning and the impact of religion. And if you have that, well, you can see that you have ways to improve. You reveal needs and gaps. And if you have ways to improve, then you can define objectives, and then you can define indicators, and then you can just simply start evaluating. For example, one thing that can happen, as I was saying, if you realize that social actors have problems dealing with religion, then the answer can be a specific training on Pcb and religion for social actors. So you can see there how you can improve. Next slide, please. And also, we had a similar retext about the post-crisis and victim support system. As I said, the city decided to contribute to a victim support system which was led by the prefecture, so by state agencies. And the retext showed, among other things, that, for example, we were right to have a mobile unit. I will talk about that just to give you a clearer idea. The participation of city employees on a volunteer basis was appreciated, but with limits. The limits is that victim support is not like ordinary social work. It's tough, it's demanding, it's specific. So we can do that, but within reasonable limits. Not everybody can do that. The anticipation, the preparation, the participation of the city was very much appreciated, for example, in terms of logistics, because this victim support system lasted for a whole week. And if you have to work intensively for a whole week, you need good conditions. About what I call the mobile unit, just to give you an idea of how you can identify good practices. Most of the time, if you have a victim support system, it's a static unit. You have a static unit in one part of a city, and people have to come to the victim support unit. People have to come to the unit. In that case, what was specific about this attack is that Shekat went all throughout the city center. And so we had a huge number of witnesses. And also, he was killed only 48 hours after the event. So he was on the run for 2 days. And that created a lot of stress and a lot of fear. And that's why we thought it would be good to not only let people come to us, but also go meet the people in the city center. And that's why we decided, it was a first time, we decided to have this mobile unit and it gave very interesting results. Next slide, please. Yeah, so it's really the end of my presentation. Some words of conclusion. As I said, some evaluation is always better than no evaluation at all. Focus on what you can do easily. And what you can do easily to start with is reflect on your objectives. Also, a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. It comes from Romeo and Juliet, and it says that it doesn't matter too much what you call it, the effect will be the same. So in that case, it doesn't matter too much if it's evaluation or monitoring or retext or feedback. The most important thing is to improve your systems. And in that respect, evaluation is but a means to an end. Evaluation is not a means, it's not an end in itself. It's only useful if it helps you to improve your systems. Pcb is not like any other field, no need to elaborate on that too much. Pcb is sensitive, is complicated, and keep in mind that some things are inherently very difficult to elaborate, if only because you can't really have a control group. We know, for example, that risk assessment tools are very difficult to evaluate and to prove empirically. That's a fact. And my last piece of advice is to simply use available resources, and if anything, just take a look at round papers on the round website, because there is already a couple of papers on evaluation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eric, for sharing your thoughts with us. And there are two questions in the Q&A session. One's kind of practical. It says, sorry, I don't know what the retext is. Can somebody explain or define? Because it's rather French, Eric. So maybe you can explain what a retext is or how it works.
Well, as I said, retext stands for return of experience. So it happens after an operation, and it's not a specific technique or methodology, actually. After an operation, you gather all the interesting parties and you try to debrief on what happened. And the idea is to identify the good practices, but also the limits of an intervention. So the relationship to evaluation is that retext is not synonymous for evaluation, but the relationship is that the retext will allow you to identify where you did well and where you did not so well. And after that, you can set new objectives and just start evaluating. So it really helps in that respect.
Okay, thank you. So I guess we'll have time for one more last question. There, I was wondering if the speakers have any experience on evaluation of alternative narratives campaigns done by youngsters or municipalities, so oftentimes with small budget resources. So is there any knowledge on evaluation of alternative narratives campaigning? Do you have anything to say about that, Eric?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, on two grounds, really. Last year, we had a round local meeting in Vienna on evaluation, and we had a very good example of how you can evaluate, for example, a workshop on critical thinking. But it's really something that it's not easy to do, because you evaluate opinions and representations. So you can do that, but don't do it yourself, because you need the right techniques. And in this case, you need a control group. So you can do that theoretically, but you need to have, for example, one school that doesn't take the workshop and another school that does take the workshop, and you see the how opinions evaluate before and after the workshop. So it can be done, but it's difficult.
Okay, thank you. Okay, maybe Ron, do you have something to share with us on this?
Yes, we are involved in a European project. It's called Project Grey. And in this project, we study if narratives, alternative narratives, as a campaign with moderate views on, in this case, on immigration, on polarization, on other groups. If what you are studying is if this moderate campaign is confronted online, is targeted online on communities which are very polarized, and if the polarized community is exposed to the moderate narratives, if it works. This is what we are investigating at present.
Okay, interesting.
And the first results show that there is a slight effect.
Slight effect. Okay, yeah. Super. Well, I see also already in the Q&A session, people are thanking both of you for your stories and your presentations. I would like to do so too, but I think Lieke will do so. So I will hand the mic virtually to Lieke to wrap up the meeting. Lieke, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Rick. Thank you both, Ron and Eric, for your very interesting contributions. I hope for all our attendees this was very insightful. At least I have found it very insightful. So thank you very much also for your openness in sharing your insights. I do also want to go into the evaluation of counter or alternative narratives campaigns, because with the RAN Communications and Narratives Working Group, we have had a meeting about monitoring and evaluating such campaigns last year. So if you are interested, you can find the exposed paper that we wrote about how to monitor and evaluate counter and alternative narrative campaigns on the RAN website. Eric also mentioned there are a few RAN papers about evaluation to be found on the website. So if you are still interested in looking for some more information about evaluation, please have a look there. We also have, as I indicated in the beginning, we have the survey about this event, which will be posted in the chat, and it will also be visible in a pop-up screen once you go out of this meeting. So please take 2 or 3 minutes to fill in the survey. And I think then that brings us to the end of the meeting. If you have still any questions, please always feel free to contact us from the RAN staff. We hope you enjoyed this webinar. We thank you for your attendance, and we hope to see you again shortly at another RAN event. Thank you very much and have a good evening.